Hey, what's up, guys? This is Slavic. I am back for another cool live video. So I was trying to do this a little earlier in the week, but I didn't have time. So some of you might see me. I schedule a streaming video for a video about the founder of Wikipedia and how he was like agnostic slash atheist, more leaning more agnostic, but he actually founded Wikipedia. One of the co-founders, he wrote a lot of code and articles for it. His name's Larry Sanger, as you guys can see it right here if you see the YouTube video. So he actually became a Christian and he had a crazy testimony of how he became a Christian. And I actually am really shocked in a good way that he is hey, what's up, Jonathan Denton? How are you, man? Probably first time I've seen you in the live stream. I haven't done a lot of live streams, but I've done some with Joe Rogan, interviewed Wesley Huff, and now with this Wikipedia founder. I actually like doing live streams of interviews of people. It's pretty fun because you get to see their interviews and their thoughts, and then you get to also talk about it. But so this interview is pretty powerful. I listened to some of it on another podcast, but this one's with Sean McDowell. His father was Josh McDowell, and who wrote Evidence Demands a Verdict. I actually read it like 17 years ago, 18 years ago when I became a Christian. My mom read it. She wasn't really convinced about it and became anti-Christian. Well, I mean, she says she respects Christianity, but the thing is that she basically turned away from the evidence even though she knew there was some evidence for it. But his book, Sean McDowell's book, is the one that led many people to Christ over the years, and it still stands the test of time even though there's been more evidence for Christianity. Sure, there's a lot of a lot of atheists that don't like Josh McDowell, Sean McDowell. They think that these apologists are not real honest people. But it's just always atheists saying these things about Christians, and the Christians are like, well, here's the counter evidence for Christianity. So it's like there's all these arguments. I've read so many counter arguments, counter arguments. It's like, okay, I mean, there is enough evidence for Christianity to accept it. And there's enough evidence of Christianity. If you want to reject it, you'll reject it. I mean, there's a channel called Myth Vision with Derek Lambert, and he was an apologist, and he rejected Christianity. And he has a lot of reasons for it. The biggest one is his prayers weren't answered, which is Young Don Reborn, another guy on YouTube who rejected Christianity because his prayers weren't answered. And he's like, well, God's not real. And it's like it's a really basic error that people make when they say, well, God doesn't answer prayers, he's not real. Or he's just like Dionysus and all these other gods, where Christians 2,000 years ago said the same thing. It's like, yeah, these people say they're like the same gods of Egypt and Rome, but in reality, the name Jesus is so much more powerful than any of these gods. And just because the miracles look the same or similar does not mean that the New Testament is false. So the thing is that the power of Christ is so powerful that, as you'll hear in this testimony video, that Larry Sanger, even though he was an agnostic and he didn't believe the Bible, he researched it left and right, read it through, tried to disprove it, but he had an encounter with God and he realized, yeah, this is powerful. This is true. So I'm gonna play it. So with all that said, I'm gonna play this interview and let you guys decide what you think, because I think it's pretty unexpected to hear the Wikipedia founder become a Christian, but it is amazing how he became a Christian. It's not like a standard story, but he weaved his way in, and he actually experienced the occult, or he understood how Hollywood and the darkness behind it prove that there is actually God. Because if these people worship the occult and the darkness, then there must be evidence for the other side, which is Christianity. So let's check this out.
Write that. I just sort of worked on it off and on for a year.
Also, let me know if you don't hear it. If you don't hear it well, I can turn up the volume. I have a pretty okay stream setup, but if you don't hear it, let me know. And also, I have a goal for the chat. I'm a missionary and evangelist. So I live on, basically on support as a missionary. So if you guys want to support this channel, I'd love for you guys to be a monthly member here, or if you want to donate to the ministry directly, just look at my description link. I'm part of a ministry called Kingdom Enterprises. So if you guys want to support me and my wife, as we're both full-time missionaries, and this is my channel, It'd be really great. And it's up to you guys. If you feel led by the Lord, I'd love your support. We definitely live by people, believing in the mission of what we do as evangelists, and I'm an evangelist. So if you guys are interested in supporting this ministry and what I do, especially on my YouTube channel, it'd be great if you guys want to become monthly members here on YouTube, do a one-time donation, or support me through the ministry website, Kingdom Enterprises, which is on my description link below. But whatever you guys feel led to do, prayer is the most important thing. So if you guys can pray for me, for this channel, for our evangelism ministry, and for America to come to Christ, that'd be awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so basically when I finished it, I posted it. But I didn't want to announce it. Like I deliberately put off announcing my conversion for a few years because basically I I didn't want to uh, go out into the public and too loudly declare myself
Mm.
without being able to defend doctrine,
Okay.
both theology and the Bible. So, and I have studied both quite a bit in the last 5 years. So, I'm not saying that I'm ready.
Of
I'm not,
course, of course.
but yeah, I'll do my best.
Oh, you're going to do great. I've always kind of wondered what kind of mind created Wikipedia. And then when I've read your account and how much you love truth, seek truth, research, I'm like, now it makes sense. Now, you formally described yourself as a skeptic, a non-believer, but you are not an enemy of faith. Maybe tell us a little bit of the kind of non-believer you were. And I'm also really curious what you thought of the new atheist movement.
Well, I described myself as an agnostic, so I didn't take a position for or against. Um, a lot of atheists today simply say if you lack a belief in God, then you're an atheist. Well, I lacked a belief in God, but I didn't call myself an atheist. I called myself an agnostic, which is to say, I withheld the proposition. That's what philosophers say.
I'm gonna interrupt a little bit because sometimes YouTube can ban you if you don't do interruptions between interview. But the thing is that what I found is that I talked to lots of atheists, talked to hundreds in over my course, as sharing about Christ, is that you can't be an honestly, you can be an atheist because atheism is atheism, no God, so you don't believe in a God. So atheists always say to me, "Well, you proved to me there's a God. It's on you. The onus is on you," which is true in both cases. I need to prove it, and the atheist needs to prove there's no God. But in reality, you can't be a true atheist in terms of knowledge because you'd have to have all knowledge in the universe to prove that there is in that pie of knowledge that there is not a God hiding somewhere in the universe that you don't know about. So you can honestly be an agnostic, but to be a full atheist, you'd have to have you have to have 100% knowledge of the whole universe to know there's no God, absolutely no God. So this guy's being intellectually honest, saying that I'm an agnostic, which is like Alex O'Connor is more that now. It's like before Alex O'Connor used to be pretty much a atheist, like hardcore, but now he's leaning more towards yeah, maybe there's evidence for a God of Christianity. I could believe in it, which is amazing of how far Alex O'Connor has come.
So I neither affirmed nor denied that God exists. I said, essentially, I don't know, or I haven't made up my mind. I will say, though, that I didn't think too much about it. So it wasn't what William James called a live option. That was William James, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it wasn't a live option for me. But that being said, I was willing to concede that it was possible to be a rational Christian, right? So in that sense, I wasn't opposed. I just was unconvinced. I thought that the arguments were not very good, and also so to get to the other part of your question, basically, I found the new atheist representatives, with a possible exception of Daniel Dennett, who's sort of a special case, obnoxious and unreasonable, in the sense of being closed to actual reasoning that people would give them. Now, I know this isn't the case always, and there are a lot of people who will argue, seriously argue at length. But the ones that I encountered, the atheists that I tended to encounter, I guess these are mostly the rank and file, were, as I say, obnoxious and unreasonable. They tended to be, again, just in my experience, ignorant of the Bible. Like, I knew more of the Bible, and I didn't know that much about the Bible at the time, and I knew more than they did.
It's interesting that the Wikipedia co-founder Larry Sanger is like, yeah, these new atheists, they were railing against the Bible, because if you guys remember, like, there was these 4 atheists, one of them died, Christopher Hitchens, and I've read their stuff and listened to their videos and debates, and it's like they're very anti-theists. I mean, I spend so much hours looking, and hundreds of hours just looking at their side of why God is evil from their perspective, and then trying to understand it. Okay, what does the Bible really say about God of the Bible? Why is he evil? Because in their understanding, atheism really has no foundational standard of morality, because it's just whatever is with what the culture says. So if the culture says, this is the right thing to do, then the culture decides. And because, like, in slavery, it's like, yeah, 2,000 years ago, sure, the Bible had rules for certain slavery, how to treat slaves right, but it wasn't God's perfect standard of morality. Now, 2,000 years ago, the atheists, they would allow it because it would be normal, it would be accepted. So it's like, where's the morality? What is and what is should be? To them, they borrow from a Christian ethic. The atheists, like the 4 atheists of the apocalypse, they borrow from a Christian ethic to say this is wrong, not realizing that they're borrowing from the Christian ethic. And even Richard Dawkins knew that, and he said that. Richard Dawkins recently said that I know I'm born in a Christian culture, and I'd rather be in a Christian culture than in Muslim culture. So it's an admission to what Larry Sanger is saying.
And even people like Sam Harris, who portrays himself as a philosopher, he clearly doesn't know very much philosophy. I always thought that, and I actually picked up some books here. I can find one that I actually bought here. Where is it? It doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, it's okay. You don't necessarily have to find them right now.
I found it.
Okay.
The God Delusion. I got this actually in 2020, I think, or maybe it was 2021, after my conversion, because I thought, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to try to see what, like, serious arguments somebody like Richard Dawkins will make. They're not serious arguments at all. It's exactly as I had experienced before. They're lightweight. They don't show an awareness of the
crazy
intricacies on either side.
So he's read the books. He's read the God Delusion. I mean, this is a great thing, because this is an equal on the intelligence level of Richard Dawkins. This guy's an equal, and he read his books.
So, it'd be somebody like Michael Martin, who wrote a thick book called Atheism for philosophers, who would be a better representative of atheism. Anyway, so maybe I'm going too long here.
No, that's really helpful. I was just curious, because you were an agnostic during the time that they were dominating the public conversation. So I was curious, your assessment of that movement. Totally helpful. Yeah. I agree. There are other representatives much more sophisticated that raise good objections, like Michael Martin. that need to be taken seriously. Now, let's go back to your childhood. I found it fascinating that you described back to your grandparents and your parents. Your parents were born in the Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. Before we
Yes,
come to your,
my dad.
oh, go ahead.
My mom was. My dad was not.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad converted to Lutheranism when he was 10 or 12, I think. A friend brought him. But then he joined the church, and they actually met and married there. So
did
and
you
they
go
stayed Lutheran for a long time.
Did you go to church? Did you practice? Was that a part of your life growing up before your teenage years?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Now we went pretty much every week from the time I was born until I was about 12. And then, well, my parents got divorced and we stopped going to church after that. So, but it was actually right around that same time that I was confirmed within the Lutheran Church. Yeah. So, but
Okay.
I remember Vacation Bible School at St. Paul's Lutheran Church.
Yeah.
Anchorage, Alaska. We didn't do a lot of Bible reading, but we did some. I did some. I remember having my Bible and looking through it, and I didn't understand the basic sorts of things that really ought to be taught to every child who reads any piece of the Bible. Like, yes, you have to read it long parts all the way through. You can't. It's not a book of aphorisms.
It's very true. I found that lacking in the modern American. I don't know how it is in other countries. I am from Ukraine originally, so I'm immigrant, but I grew up, finding Christ here in America. But I did, been all around churches in America, different types, and then I found that, people just don't teach you how to read the Bible in context and long passages. It's all like different, it's all like little snippets, and that's why a lot of people, then they learn the truth about, oh, the Bible contains this. I didn't know this. That's not what they told me. They didn't tell me about Mark chapter, whatever, 16, where they took out the resurrection or something, story, or they took out the woman caught in adultery or this. And so then all these, people who grew up in Christianity, they become like anti-Christians because they're like, yeah, the Bible's, fake, and full of it, and we've been taught lies. And so, I'm just giving an example, but it's like, or the God is evil, I can't believe there's this rape and all these things in the Bible. I was just researching some more stuff about apologetics today, just some questions that people bring up, and it's like, yeah, if you don't get taught this stuff, you can get jaded. The devil can really, or just you meet other people and they're like, yeah, have you really read what the Bible says about this? And sure, the Bible doesn't hide a lot of bad stuff that happens, and it's in certain parts of the Bible, it's a violent book, but it doesn't mean that God's condoning all of that. It just means that, or that's God's perfect will, but it's that, the Bible doesn't hide the sins of its characters. And so a lot of times young people grow up reading the Bible like Larry Sanger, and they're like, this is, this is like all fairy tales when they get older, because they were never told, the context of what they were reading. And it's like, yeah, a lot of people grew up in the Catholic Church, and the church he grew up in, which was Lutheran. It's like they all become anti-theists, and it's because there's a lack of true education about the Bible.
Cannot be treated that way. Other basic stuff like that I didn't understand. So I did pray a fair bit, and I asked a lot of questions, but I did not get a lot of guidance in answering them. I got some, but I was told by various people in my life that I asked too many questions. So, yeah.
I can understand that. Now, we're going to come to the reasons for your deconversion as a teen.
Yeah.
But what was it like when you went to your parents and grandparents and said, I just don't believe this anymore?
I'm not. I can't really remember very well. It wasn't a big deal. It
okay.
really. I mean,
Okay.
at that time, so that I would have like told them probably when I was 17 or 18.
Hmm.
Um, uh, my dad was sort of a new ager. Temporarily, he returned
Hmm.
to the faith after another 10 years after that, I think. Um, my mom was, I think she was more bothered by it. But she told me later that prayed very regularly that I would return to the faith.
Hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. I hear stories like that too, like some family member prays for the other person, I guess, completely against Christ and becomes involved in drugs, LSD, atheism, and that prayer gets answered like sometime later in that person's life. Not again, not always, because people have free will, but it seems like God really does answer these kind of prayers of family members. It's amazing.
And then when I told her that I was, well, converted again, she said, "No, my prayers have been answered." So,
Hmm. That's cool to hear. What are the factors? You're a teenager. What was it that made you just say, "I don't believe in God. I'm not a Christian anymore"?
um, well, it was a number of things. So, first of all, I we stopped going to church. I had fallen out of the habit of praying. And
Hmm.
so I just didn't think about God generally very much. Um, and when I did once again start thinking about God, it was actually in the context of a philosophy course that I took in the second semester of my junior year of high school. It was a great course, and it actually is what sort of led me to take up philosophy. Um, and one of the questions that we would have asked there is, does God exist? And so we would have reviewed the traditional arguments for the existence of God and that sort of thing. It got me thinking about it even more, but newly, interested in it. And I came to the conclusion, just looking at, because you have to remember this is like, I am a child of the 70s and the 80s, so my older siblings and like a half generation older than me were were hippies or influenced by hippie culture,
Okay,
right? So
interesting.
the drug culture was big, and that just
Mm,
started screwing people up a lot. And
mm,
I saw a lot of these screw ups. I'm not saying my family was.
Yeah, the drug culture really introduced, I mean, a lot of people to substitute a relationship with God with relationship with drugs. I mean, it definitely was one of the big downfalls of the United States was the drug culture and the Vietnam War. The communism that was rising up in America due to as a response to the Vietnam War and all the racism that was happening. So it's like, so yeah, you had a lot of like stuff in America and a lot of like my friend who led me to Christ, or his father, was huge in the drug culture, and he became a Hindu, a Hare Krishna, and he saw things. He had his mind opened up to different realities, but once he cried out to Jesus, his whole life was transformed. But he did so many he did so many like trips to on acid that he saw different realities. Of course, there's realities beyond this one. But the thing is that it never truly satisfied his search for real love until he met Christ, until he cried out to Christ in one of his trips. So, what this guy is saying is absolutely correct about how the drug culture opened up the demonic spirits in America to take it over. But also, God used that in order to help people experience the supernatural in a way that that they knew that supernatural stuff they saw was truly evil and experiencing Christ was truly good. Hey, what's up, Jonathan? Yeah, stopping prayer and going to church for signs of falling away. Yeah, it happened to me as well, but the Lord sent someone to my life to help me restore my faith. I'm loving them. Thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah, that's I didn't walk away from Jesus because I had a pretty radical encounter as an immigrant from Ukraine, America, when I gave my life to Christ. This was 2004, so it's been a while. But so yeah, almost 20 years. Wow, it's I forget how like long I've been walking with the Lord. But I did. Thanks for the audio is good. Thanks. But the thing is that like I did compromise a lot in my faith, and I did have a great season of doubt a few years ago, and a lot of like the stuff that atheists like said, it's like almost convinced me, oh yeah, Christianity can't be it's true. But the thing is that like something like a demonic spirit attached itself on me. I felt it, and then once I said, I know God is real. I've experienced all these like stuff about Jesus not being the way, the truth, and the life. Like this is ridiculous. Like I know God is real, and then this demon, like this whatever the confusion, the depression left me and never came back. And so it's like I know that all these like doubts about God's goodness, even though there's hard stuff in the Bible. I mean, I agree. It's hard to explain some stuff in the Bible, but it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. And Jesus' name is so powerful; He can save you from demonic spirits on a drug trip. So yeah. But thanks for sharing, Jonathan.
But I knew them. I didn't know very. I knew a guy who was very big into drugs and who actually murdered his girlfriend.
Goodness.
And I it made not just that, but all of these things made an impression on me. And it occurred to me, especially after taking that philosophy class, that these people all had just a lot of false beliefs, and the thought just lodged itself in my head that if there were certain beliefs of theirs that changed, then they wouldn't do the things that they do.
Hmm.
And then I took the next step and said, well, if that's the case, then it's really important that I know the truth. And well, then I thought, well, what are the requirements for really knowing the truth? And I said, well, first of all, you have to be able to clearly articulate what it is that you believe. If you don't even know what you believe, then you don't have knowledge. And second, you have to have conclusive reasons. I didn't put it quite that way. That's
Sure.
sort of highfalutin philosophy talk, but had to have really good reasons to believe. And the reasons have to support that particular claim. And I said, well, I know practically nothing then by those standards. And it actually bothered me because, well, then maybe I'm going to end up making similar sorts of mistakes that I can't even anticipate, right? And so I said, well, one of the things that I could be wrong about, that I might, waste my time on, for example, is the existence of God. So I'm just going to withhold, I didn't use that word, but that's what I meant. I was going to withhold that proposition, neither believe nor disbelieve that, and a number of other things. And it was only until, I don't know, 10 or 20 years later, beginning when I was a graduate student, that I sort of left my state of Cartesian doubt and started saying, okay, I actually do believe, that, there are a number of different things. I started taking positions on philosophical questions. So,
That's really helpful. You weren't on this anti-theistic crusade. You're just trying to figure out what truth is and orient your life in a way you didn't make mistakes of the people around you. And that meant thinking about God at least a little bit, and you weren't convinced. Now, there's
sufficient respect, snot-nosed teenager and all, pimply-faced, braced teenager, yes, but I did have legitimate questions for sure, that I hoped maybe he would have some interesting answers to, but he really didn't give me any substantive answers. He was probably the wrong one to ask. I just, did the luck of the draw. I can't remember who it was. It was not the pastor of the Lutheran Church, I think. I think it was someone else.
So if you guys are tuning in. This is a interview that the co-founder of Wikipedia, as you guys see in the title here, found Christ, and it's pretty amazing testimony. I'm going through it's going through his like beginning of how he came back to believe in God through philosophy classes, and he had a lot of questions that were never answered by Christians, and it happens a lot. The people, it's like Christians don't know how to answer really difficult questions, but he started searching for himself. So I might go through to get to the meat of it because it's sometimes it's just a long explanation. But anyways, that's what it is right now.
Yeah,
and that's okay. We're not. Yeah, we're not trying to call anybody out, and not every pastor is necessary.
I didn't know of any. Well, let's put it this way. I took these matters seriously, and I would at least seriously enough to do more than just read the books that I was teaching out of, but actually look at some of the deeper, more advanced source material. And whenever I did that, I never really found anything that addressed the sorts of issues that I had. So there's one general thing that I came back to, although each different argument had problems of its own on my view. But in general, none of the arguments actually established, even if you grant the premises, none of them seem to establish the ultimate conclusion that God exists. Like that, the first cause argument, all it does is establish that there was a first cause outside of the universe that caused the universe to come into being. And this we call God that comes at the end.
So that's exactly what Alex O'Connor and Matt Dillahunty say. It's like, it's like okay, we can establish that there's a first cause outside the universe, so we call that God. It's like it's the same reasoning.
Enormous leap. It doesn't follow. I still think that it's true. It doesn't follow. There's a lot of other things that you need to say before you can draw that conclusion. But it's a very important conclusion. I now think, it's very important that we be able to say that there was a first cause, or that there is a causal explanation of different.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, you can't get away from it, even if you're the smartest atheist scientist right now in the world. I forgot the guy's name. He's on YouTube all the time. The black guy. What's his name? Forgot. But if you're in the chat, remember, I just forgot his name. But he's like, everywhere, and it's like you can be very smart, but it's like you can't get away from the fact that whatever begins to exist has to have a cause. I mean, it's just a premise that is logical and it's reasonable because things don't just begin to exist for no reason. They usually have a cause. Even if in quantum mechanics, I mean, you have the proton, neutron, you have the quarks, you have even in qubits, like in the computer, there's quantum computers. It's like these things, yeah, they can probably exist at, two different places at once, like, which is what quantum mechanics talks about, and teleportation. But it's like, but there has to be something that causes these things to happen. They don't just doesn't just pop into existence. I mean, that's what they say, but there's another law that is operating even in quantum mechanics.
Different elements in the universe. So, yeah.
So you weren't convinced, but you gave them a lot of thought, and so in a sense, I thought it was interesting. You said somebody could rationally believe in God, but they're certainly not compelling, and didn't compel you to believe in God. So,
yeah, well, I mean, I was intellectually modest enough, humble enough at the time to admit that maybe I just don't understand things as well as I should. Right? I mean, that was, again, part of my skepticism. If you're going to be truly a skeptic, then it doesn't involve denying things. It involves withholding the proposition and having epistemic humility, right? So you don't know, not you deny. There's a big difference between those things. So yeah, I thought that sure, like for example, one of my heroes in epistemology, a guy who influenced my dissertation a lot, is William Alston.
Yeah.
And he's you know, a closest associate of Plantinga, and I read
Planning is a famous scientist, for those who don't know.
most of what Alston wrote, at least in epistemology, and I got my hands on a book called Perceiving God, and I didn't read the whole thing, maybe just the first couple of chapters, and I just found myself mystified, because he seemed to presuppose a religious experience that I didn't have, which is okay because that's the nature of that kind of argument. That kind of argument, what it does is it's an attempt to understand the religious experiences that people have, right? So it's based on the premise that people have a certain kind of religious experience. I didn't have that religious experience at all. I said, well, maybe in the future I will have such a religious experience.
That's interesting. Alex O'Connor made videos about it too, and you could watch, Alex O'Connor talk about that. But he talked to Ruslan, another Christian YouTuber, but he said that like I'm open to have religious experience. So it's like he was just. I mean, it's funny. Alex is like copying the exact same thing as Larry Sanger is kind of lifestyle, but it's like he's open. He was open, just like Alex O'Connor is like open to have an experience, and he admitted it. So it's interesting, It's like, okay.
Myself, and then, maybe I'll have a reason to believe that I don't now have. That's what I told myself.
So you're open to it, sounds like, which is great. There's
I didn't take it seriously, though, right? There's a difference between merely being open to it and actually taking it very seriously.
Now, that leads me exactly to the next question, because you said you had this thought for a while that kind of, I don't know if you said troubled you or bothered you, that maybe you hadn't really given Christianity a fair shake. Yeah. Where did that thought come from? Why did that affect you? And what did it mean to say, all right, I'm going to give it a fair shake?
Well, there's at least two questions there. I mean, the reason that I concluded that I hadn't given it a fair shake is quite frankly, my repeated encounters with atheists and with the new atheists and all of their followers, and it had by that time been like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years since I had even taught a philosophy class. So 2010, 2015. And I thought maybe I'm like those people myself, but in a more low-key way. Maybe I'm not really being properly intellectually honest about the possible case that could be made for Christianity, and I'm just too glibly and easily assuming that it's that there's nothing to the argument. And
it's interesting. Like kernel of truth he started thinking about that.
I remember thinking this. It's like, well, maybe I'll get back into it. Maybe I'll start like studying it again, and I'll change my mind. But I just never took the time to do that. But it did seem to me important that I do that, and it was actually important ultimately that I go through that process. It's like it's open. Well, I'm a little embarrassed to admit that between the age of about 16 and 26, I was a somewhat of a devotee of Ayn Rand. So I liked her libertarianism and her devotion to rationality, there are certain things about her philosophy that I never really was quite on board with. But she definitely served as a kind of model, I guess, of my own non-belief. It's like my reasons for not believing in God would have been perhaps similar to her reasons. And well, one of the things that Ayn Rand is famous for is the so-called virtue of selfishness. And really what this amounts to is, yes, we have obligations to other people, and we ought to treat them with justice and so forth, but that ultimately can only be defended, justified, in terms of our own self-interest. In other words, it's ultimately good for me to treat others with justice, essentially.
So Ayn Rand was like an atheist, and a lot of conservatives really like her, or libertarians. You might be libertarian, you might like Ayn Rand. It's not that she didn't have some good things. I mean, she was against communism, and I'm from an ex-communist country, so I know communism doesn't work. But the thing is that she was stuck in the idea that, oh, it's only about libertarianism, it's what you can get out of it. And yeah, you can benefit other people, but it's really about you. It's about how you benefit in the end. So she didn't have the concept of, you know, love others, as yourself, like Jesus did, the golden rule. It's more like, do unto others, because you'll get something in return.
Um, and even I thought, even to do good for other people. And maybe it's because, I don't know, makes us feel good, or, well, there's more to it than that. But at any rate, okay. Then I had a wife, and, after 5 years, I had a child. And I reflected,
Children will definitely change you, make you think about a lot of things.
from time to time, that I would die for these people, of course. Uh, and then that raises the question, if I'm willing to die for them, then what is the ethical egoism justification of that? It isn't in my self-interest, it's in their interest, and I am deliberately placing their interest ahead of mine.
That's powerful, guys. I don't know if he caught that, but he realized after having a child, it's like, yeah, I will die for these people. And I mean, I know atheists will argue with me, but it goes against survival of the fittest. It really does. If you're really honest with yourself, you're an atheist, agnostic, or you believe in evolutionary, applied evolutionary theory to our current life. Not that evolution doesn't exist in within species, but I'm talking about macro evolution where there's no God. But the thing is that survival of the fittest, why would you die for something like a baby? I mean, a baby can't do anything. It can't help you. Doesn't, I mean, it makes you feel good about, like, oh yeah, there's a human life, but where does that idea of love come from? I mean, how is that survival of the fittest? So, the thing is that Ayn Rand based her idea on like evolutionary survival. Like, yeah, if you die for this or you provide for this person, it's because it benefits you. But he realized it was like, wait a minute, it benefits them. It's for them that I would die, not because they can offer me anything. It sounds like the same, but it's not. It's really revolutionary once you understand what Larry's saying.
Um, so I said, well, Ayn Rand was wrong about that. And therefore, uh, maybe she was wrong about other things as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't take Ayn Rand as sort of like my benchmark um, philosopher. If anyone, that would be
Yeah.
Thomas Reid, the Scottish School of Common Sense guy, who I still like. But no, but that made an impression, right? Uh, so, yeah. Anyway, I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. You totally did. That's a fascinating piece of your journey. And I'm going to come back to this, but it seems to be a combination of experience. Your in
My
Okay.
my I was befriended by this guy who was very um, well. Let's just say he opened my eyes to all the evils that Jeffrey Epstein had committed, and any number.
Whoa. Now we get to the nitty gritty of how Jeffrey Epstein and all these CIA assets and intelligence agency assets that were doing pedophilia and trapping people into the occult, using the occult. This, once you understand the Epstein files and pedophilia and globalists, satanic globalists, then I met people. I mean, when I, in my journeys of evangelism around America, I met them. They said the same thing. They're like, once I realized there was evil like Epstein, I knew there was a God. I mean, this is what you're gonna
Number of other sort of high profile pedophiles. And
Good news, Kash Patel got in, the FBI. He said he wants to destroy the FBI. Well, but right now I know he can because I guess, Trump would have to decide that. But let's pray that Kash Patel does expose the whole FBI, the Epstein list, and that it destroys the FBI, all these intelligence agencies, and that it sends people to prison for life or execution chair because we know the U.S. intelligence agencies and other countries' intelligence agencies that are friends of the U.S. have been running pedophilia rings. I mean, this is obvious, and now let's pray it comes out because you can't hide it anymore. It all has to come out.
all of the people who were surrounding them, and for all I know are surrounding them. And there's so many different instances of these groups throughout society, and we know about crime. You only see the tip of the iceberg, so there's more than we know about, for sure. And these are, again, you can call them high profile elites, pedophile elites. And one thing that my friend insisted on, I don't know how much he was right about this, but that a lot of the people who get into that sort of thing are occultists. They are like Freemasons, or they are into other branches, Rosicrucians, or creepy New Agers or whatever.
Yes, I like this guy. I talk about this stuff sometimes on my channel too. I'm very, very well familiar with all the different occult um, organizations that they are. I mean, I've talked to people who are into these occult groups, and that's how they've experienced being delivered from that. I mean, this is huge. This is what should drive people to Jesus Christ.
Especially in Hollywood. Um, and he was like encouraging me to like use my voice to speak out against these people, which I did to a certain extent, but I didn't get too much into the occult side of things because I wasn't totally convinced. And he said, well, you need to read these books. So I looked at some of the books that he recommended, and it's like, it really creeped me out, you know. And one of the things that I had learned through my investigation of these things is that according to these occultists, it is the knowledge itself which has a consequential spiritual effect. You know, it opens spiritual doors, right? And they'll even put it.
He's absolutely right. It's like this. It really goes back to the garden, of true knowledge, good and evil. Yes, I know people debate whether it's polemic against, the gods of Sumeria, which it could be, of course, Genesis, but also there is truth to the fact that something happened where God gave us free will, told us one command, don't eat it, but he gave us free will to choose it because again, love requires that you have free will to choose. You can't just be a robot. But it did do something to us as humans where the knowledge of good and evil, or evil, good and evil led to evil, the knowledge of evil, and then the occult societies built themselves from that since the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, Freemasonry was started 10th century BC, or that's what they go back to Solomon's temple. The two towers. That's the Freemasonry idea of the temple and stuff. So it's like there's this, and I've studied this knowledge, and it's like it's a rabbit hole. I mean, you can go deep into it, get lost in it. There's a guy, agnostic informant. Um, he's like totally against Christianity, says it's a myth based on myth, but he's into Gnosticism. He says like Christianity borrowed Gnostics. It's like, no, John talks about the Gnostics were the spirit of the Antichrist. So just because there were spirits of Gnostics, the Bible wrote about these Gnostics that they were denied Jesus came in the flesh, that he wasn't fully God or fully man, and so that's how you go into error. And so these Gnostics, they evolved into Freemasons. So he's getting into the deep of the wickedness. Hey, thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for coming in, Jonathan. Saw your Yeah, thank you for keeping me in your prayers. I appreciate it. Man, God bless you. I'll be praying for you too, for God to continue moving in your life. God bless.
that way and be proud of themselves for opening such doors. Well, I didn't want to open any such doors myself, that's for sure. Um, and yet, again, because of what my friend had told me, and because I could see it myself, like that Freemasonry is full of Old Testament symbolism. If you didn't know it, it's true. You can look it up. All right. Um,
Yeah, I mean, if you guys study Freemasonry, it is like Old Testament stuff, like if you look at it, all the different Thummim that they use in the Old Testament to kind of like have God's presence come in, like they use it in Freemasonry, the checkerboard, the dark to light, light to dark. I mean, all that stuff is borrowed. It's like a twisting of the Old Testament through Satan's knowledge of the universe.
and uh, and basically a lot of the sort of symbology that is involved in the Rosicrucians and New Age and all the rest of that stuff is drawn pretty much directly from the Bible, and they've got their own traditions and so forth, but the ultimate source is the Bible. And so I said, okay, one thing that it would be safe for me to study if I'm going to try to understand these people more would be to read the Bible. So, and I went through that thought process in like the summer of 2019, but I didn't get around to actually starting to read the Bible until that December.
Strikes me that there's almost like a healthy fear beginning of like opening up these.
I'm not sure I ever really understood why I got so obsessed with it. Maybe I was led by the Holy Spirit. But I
Talking about being obsessed about reading the Bible.
I mean, at first I was just gonna read it for bedtime reading, and I did that for maybe 3 or 4 days. But then, like, it was so fascinating. I actually read parts, the same part that I read to my son a few years before, and had made no impression of this sort at all. But this time I was doing something different, because I said, okay, look, I'm not just like reading this to my son so he's familiar with like the verbiage and the concepts and the characters and so forth. No, I actually want to understand it on its own terms. I actually wanted to understand what the Christians believe. All right. And this meant, and this is something I would insist on strongly now, that if you're going to study the Bible and understand it, you have to understand it the way that the people who believe it understand it, not the way that modern scholars understand it, because they're wrong.
Boom. That is like a shocking statement, which is true. Even I had problems until I understood, wait a minute, I have to read this from the reader's or the author's intent and the age of which the Bible is written. Not that the principles don't apply from the Bible, they do. It is like the inspired word of God. Not everything in the Bible is literally the right thing to do, because the Bible talks about sinful people doing sinful things. So you have to know what it's actually talking about. But the Bible does help you, like, wow, see, like, okay, this is how these people thought at that time, but the principles of the Bible are actually very applicable to today. Even if you're not a Christian, but when you're a Christian, it's like a whole new key opens up to you. It's like I felt the Holy Spirit every time I read the Bible and was like, I did not know, like I didn't realize this as I read this. And now it's like, wow, there's something even more deeper than I even thought. It happens every time I read the Bible. It's what happens when you have the Holy Spirit helping you interpret. It's like a key to a lock.
They don't take it the way the ancient Hebrews did, the ancient Christians did, or modern Christians do. So I actually used I used gotquestions.org, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
It's a
great.
good website.
It's a good website. It's got, I mean, it's very, reformed, but it's got a lot of solid stuff in it, a lot of good answers, and my hat is off to those guys, and plenty of videos. Might have watched a video of yours at some point.
Okay.
And so forth. I would like ask a question. So I think that actually is what did it, right? Because it was my intention merely to understand. But then when I started doing that, it became really interesting. And the thing that was amazing to me, the more I actually looked up answers to my questions, which initially I didn't necessarily believe. I was just acquainting myself with the answers, But what I was amazed to discover is that the 2,000-year-old history of theology had been asking and answering these questions, and their answers, at least given sort of modern formulations that were palatable to me, they actually made sense. They weren't incoherent. And
Yeah, like he's right. A lot of atheists, I mean, some of them are like are familiar with Christian, understandings of the Bible and explanations of difficult passages. They'll ignore it because they're like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just Christians, trying to explain things. But if you give it an honest look, it's like, wow, all these questions have been wrestled with for 2,000 years. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge out there online and in books. It's like Christianity isn't just a joke. I mean, these questions have been wrestled with for thousands of years to come up with an understanding of what it why things are done a certain way, in the Bible. So it's an intellectual faith.
I'll tell you this other thing. This is going a little bit beyond this point in the narrative, but I actually started writing a commentary of Genesis. It ended up being over 500 pages long.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
It's basically study notes. It's questions and answers. And I asked every question that I could think of about the book of Genesis as I went through it. And some days I would spend like over an hour writing out answers. And I was able to answer every single one. And that was shocking to me as I proceeded through. In other words, let's put it this way. I'm not saying that I could give a logical proof of the compelling, nature of a particular doctrine. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that I could ask a certain question about what was meant. Why did Israel, why did he make his family and his followers wash before the sacrifice, for example? All right, I ask that, and there's an answer. Not just it's a fascinating answer, right? Why did these characters keep getting renamed by either God or by kings? All sorts of questions like that, and it's not. And there were answers that, okay, not only were there answers, but the more of the answer or questions you asked, the more it actually made sense. So it didn't just withstand questioning, it encouraged questioning. It encouraged questioning in a way where you actually will not understand and you won't believe it as well if you haven't asked the questions and learned the answers. So, like,
Wow, that's powerful. It's true. Christianity, God invites you to ask questions. I mean, there's so much knowledge. Christians are not hiding. Like people say, well, oh, they removed these things from the Bible, or there wasn't the earliest manuscripts. In my Bible, it's all written. You know, it's all we all know. We all should know this. Like, it's not hidden. But the Word of God is still pretty. It's very accurate. I mean, from the ancient manuscripts of today, it's like the truth is like right there. Just you had to investigate it, and even an inkling of faith is enough for you to experience the power of God.
okay, I'll give you a good example of that. Um, so, uh, why was Sarah, when she was captured by the second Abimelech, right? In Genesis 20, I think it is. Why was she sexually attractive to him? She was 100. She was 90 years old, right? That doesn't make any sense at all.
That's
Well, okay,
funny.
I thought about it.
100
There's
years
different
old.
theories about that. I read different commentaries. You know, there's free commentaries online that are nicely organized, so it wasn't that much work. Um, and I came up with the following answer, um, which I haven't heard very much, but I think is pretty persuasive.
All right.
Look, there was a miracle that God promised, right? That she would conceive and bear a child at age 90. Well, how is that possible? How would it happen? Well, there's two different ways for that to happen. Either her womb was rejuvenated, or the whole woman was rejuvenated. I say the whole woman was rejuvenated. And now the Bible doesn't say that. It's very, very telegraphic, which means it only says the minimum necessary for you to be able to piece the story together properly, right? So you ask that question, and it becomes then, it's, yeah, you can see that she was entirely rejuvenated. She was made sexually attractive to Abimelech, the king. And that's how that's actually why that story appears there, right? Because I mean, it's a weird interpolation, right? Another Abimelech story. Some scholars think that it shouldn't be there. That it was evidence actually of there being different textual sources. It's cited in support of the documentary hypothesis. That's BS. It's wrong. The reason is that Sarah was being shown to be sexually attractive. And this had to have happened at exactly the time when she conceived, right? And so, yes, it's illustrating. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't ask the hard question. So nobody thinks about this. Now, I actually think you have to do this with every part of the Bible.
Amen.
If you don't really carefully analyze the Bible, you're not going to learn all the things that there is. And the thing, to get back to the point, the thing that I discovered is that when you ask the hard questions and you really try to get to faithful answers, the answers of the sort that the people who believed the text had in mind, the original recipients, the smartest of them, what they understood, what they had in mind, then you will discover all sorts of things that you can't see in the text. And this is the only proper way to understand the Bible, and it's the way to make the Bible the most persuasive. So, anyway.
Wow, he explains like these deep concepts that you read as a agnostic slash atheist, and it's like, wow, he's saying things that are absolutely correct. Even most Christians don't understand. That's like you got to ask the hard questions in the Bible. I mean, you know, it's not wrong to investigate these difficult questions. I mean, even I as a Christian have difficult questions that I have to investigate because I'm like, "Ah, this doesn't make sense. It seems like it's wrong, or this doesn't make, why is this? It seems contradictory. I see this, this people say this. So it's like once I investigate it, it's like, okay, I want to know the truth. I want to know the truth. And I'm able to research all these different answers to this difficult topic that I have in the Bible. And then I realize, oh, maybe it's not the fullness of the truth, but at least you're getting closer to what the original author meant by it. So this is amazing what God, how he uses an PhD brain, to really investigate the Bible, because the Bible is like literally a PhD document if you study it. Like, I mean, people who still have PhDs still don't know the Bible. I mean, but it also could be read by a kid, like I did when I became a Christian, or before I became a Christian. I read it as a kid, and it spoke to me deeply. So it's like I'm telling you, it's for the 13-year-old and the 43-year-old PhD guy.
I love hearing you say this more than I can describe, Larry, because I've heard from so many people growing up that ask questions like you did. I was a question asker, and my dad was like, let's talk about it. Tell me your questions, was not threatened by doubts. So many people afraid to ask questions turned away, and understandably don't feel welcome in the church. And yet I tell my students the same thing. I'm like, if you actually go to the text and you look for answers, the vast majority of time, it might take some research and thought, you can find them. And you see this, one of my favorite commentaries in the Old Testament is by Dennis Prager, who's a Jew. And he starts by saying we should ask questions of the text. And when we do and we probe, because Israel means wrestle with God, it's amazing the responses that we can find. So it seems like your story is kind of coming full circle from somebody, not kicked out of the church, but not welcomed because of questions, to finally saying, wait a minute, I'm a question asker. I'm a philosopher. There's a place for me, a seat at the table, so to speak. And if I use my mind, I actually find that this is true. I love that. I just have to emphasize it for all my viewers, that we will not turn.
I know there's a lot of people who think. When I was a child, I prayed, and a lot of times my prayers took the form of me saying to God and then just imagining what God would say in response. But even as a child, I remember this, I didn't think that God was speaking to me in response. I know there's a lot of people who think that is true. It's not true. You're just using your imagination. And if it's based on the Bible, it's much more likely. Now, it's possible that the Holy Spirit is actually guiding you in imagining the answers. You must not assume that that he always is. All right. So that's all I want to say. We are not prophets because we can imagine God answering us. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I know. I've had God reveal to me and speak to me things. So, it's like, yeah, not everything that you think is God, but if you can align yourself to the truth, and again, there is a God, and he knows if you're wanting to seek him, he'll lead you to the truth.
Okay. So, when I was older, I sometimes had like deep, mostly moral questions for myself, needed sort of moral guidance. And so I would imagine a wise, this is going to be kind of strange, but I'll tell you anyway. I imagined a white-haired individual appearing outside my window in a floating car.
Okay.
It was just a way to make it
all right
interesting.
Sure.
Okay. And I would like take a gangplank and get into the car, and I would imagine asking this person questions, and getting answers. I even wrote down little dialogues, of this. But of course, I never thought that I was doing anything other than a dialogue with. Even sometimes I would say a dialogue with God about topics related to God, because I wrote a lot about philosophy that never published. It's crap. It's all bad. But anyway.
That's funny. Very humble.
At any rate, so I decided to start doing that again, experimentally, but directing my conversations to God. And that just segued imperceptibly. There was never a time when I said, well, no, I'm talking to God now. No, that sort of turned into prayer. Like at first I was talking to God about the details of philosophical arguments. And, it was often things like when I got into Psalms, like Psalm 19, I think, and 121, I believe, so some of the Psalms are very philosophical. And
yeah, the Psalms are philosophical.
And not just there, other places too, just sort of like almost casual asides. You start analyzing, just start asking questions about them as I was doing. It's like it placed things into a new perspective. And so again, I had these sorts of imagined conversations. And so I think we have to
not the one on trial. We
understand the Bible and doctrine, which is to say what you can infer reliably from the Bible. Then your answers are going to be half-baked a lot of times.
You're kind of hinting at what C.S. Lewis said, God in the dock. God is not the one on trial. We are the one on trial. And I think just one quick point before we keep going is one of the things the new atheists would do is they would go surface deep on the Bible and go slavery, misogyny, genocide. God is
it's such slavery, misogyny, genocide. God is evil. Absolutely, it's literally all the time. It's the same thing. I mean, yeah, it's like if you don't really investigate it like a PhD level guy, you are going to come to the conclusion that God is evil. I mean, it's just like the surface level. Even if you do study it and you're like, and I see a lot of comments on YouTube, people say, okay, well, the Bible says this in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and it's like, and they can lay out a whole thesis, but then there's this other guy, PhD guy, who comes out from another angle, and he's like, wait, but you haven't understood this context. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you can really like get lost in the weeds if you don't understand what the time frame was, the revelation at that time, and why God allowed certain things, how he's, the creator and giver of life and taker of life. Like there's these philosophical concepts you have to understand before making a moral judgment that God is evil. I mean, we've all had that kind of difficulty. It's like, well, why would God allow this? It's hard. I mean, exactly. But there is an answer that will satisfy the soul, and the hearer if studied in a right way.
Terrible. And those are fair objections that we need to respond to. But I was reading Jordan Peterson's recent book, We Who Rest with God, and it's like this massive text where he says, let's first just dive in and wrestle with what does this mean and what's happening. And then we address those stories once we've understood in the context, in the time, what's being said. And I have so much more respect for that approach. And I think that's what you try to do. Like, I want to understand it on its own terms. And maybe God's telling me something about holiness and righteousness and judgment. That's a very different way of reading the Bible. Now, you said earlier that when you're reading the Bible, it made you reconsider some of the arguments for God, or at least view them differently. How do you reconsider them? Do you think the arguments are good now?
Yes, I do think the arguments are much better now. I think that you have to proportion the strength of each individual conclusion to the premises of that particular argument. So, all that the argument from contingency establishes is that a necessary being exists on which the universe is contingent. That's
It's a very powerful argument, and it's basic in its premise. It's like the universe had a beginning. Well, it's contingent upon something that made it begin. But Hindus will say, no, well, the universe is always, there is cycles. It went through cycles. So there's endless billions and trillions of years of cycles, and we're living in a certain cycle. We don't know what it is, which is why I believe in reincarnation. But it's like, well, it doesn't ever actually answers the question of the beginning. It's like everything's eternal. Then it's okay. The universe is eternal. The universe is God. You hit philosophical roadblocks if you can't answer the contingency question.
all it establishes. Doesn't establish anything more, in my opinion. Now, I don't necessarily. I still try to be intellectually humble, so maybe there is a reason to immediately leap to the conclusion God exists on that basis. But here's the point.
Okay.
If you say that has a modicum of support, that's a very interesting thing. And that bare thought is what sort of that helped me to it helped me to understand the Bible, and the Bible helped me to understand that. Just when I started studying what God meant when he was saying, and is it Exodus 2, I think, when he's talking about his name,
Exodus 3. I just preached on it
3.
this past Sunday.
Right, Exodus 3. He says, I am that I am.
That's
and
right.
Like, my first thought is, that is not grammatical. What
That's not grammatical. Yeah, I am that I am.
does that mean? So I looked it up, of course, and it's like, why is it translated that way? And actually trying to come to it, to make a long story short, I learned the typical thing that is said about that, namely that it means that God is essentially existent. God is essentially being. And what that means is that God is life and sovereign. And there's a reason I say that, because what life is most essentially is an organism that keeps itself in its structure,
That is powerful. I haven't really heard anyone put it that way like Larry did. Is like, if you think about life, we're like, yeah, we don't see God necessarily, and that's why people don't believe in God. Is like, I don't see God, it doesn't exist. But it's like, but again, we're in a different realm. It's kind of like a video game realm. It's like, yeah, the characters don't see the creator of the video game, but they can actually know that they could be in the video game if they ask the right questions. Like, you can actually hit the boundaries. Like, if you ever in the video game went beyond the boundaries and it's like danger, danger. So it's kind of like that. So it's like it doesn't mean just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there, because it can see atoms and other things, quantum mechanics, but we don't see love, we can experience it. So that argument doesn't really work. But when he says life is just an organism, it just expands, it grows. It's like, yeah, where does this life come from? Where are we actually coming from? Where is life coming? Why are we even here? There had to be some sort of life beyond our life.
stasis. It keeps itself alive. God is the most alive thing because he is entirely self-existent, apart from all other things, which then leads you to the part about sovereignty. So if his existence doesn't depend on anything else, then everything else depends on him.
Amen.
If he is in fact the creator of everything, which there is reason to believe. So then that means so just interrogating that passage and why God introduces himself that way, asking a lot of hard questions about that, helps you to understand better the very notion of necessity, of God's necessity, which just cast the argument from contingency in a new light. So the argument from contingency simply says, a bird flies outside my window. I expect to see an explanation of that. Well, it hatched from an egg, and this is what birds do. Birds, maybe they evolved, or maybe they came from somewhere, and they're part of this whole system. And ultimately, you trace causes back to...
Man, this guy's such a refreshing, intelligent guy. I love hearing him talk.
An initial cause.
I'm gonna try to interview him, guys. Pray for me. I'll try to get him on my channel here.
And the bird also at a different level follows different laws, and those laws can be rooted and explained in terms of some fundamental laws and so forth. You expect an explanation of all of these things. You certainly expect an explanation of why the bird flew by my window at that moment. You think there's a reason that makes that necessary, right? Well, why isn't that true?
It's so true. It's like, why did that bird fly over his window? There's a reason why it's necessary. Same thing with the universe. Why is the universe existing? There's a reason.
The entire universe and everything that's in it, right? Including the laws and the constants and so forth. That would be a necessary being. And that a necessary being that stands in a sort of explanatory relation to the creation. Now, obviously, the big question, the sophomore question to ask about this, the question I asked when I was 10 years old, talking about these things. Well, what explains God then? What explains?
What explains?
And the point is that there's a difference between the contingent facts of the universe, which it seems could be otherwise. That's right? And we're trying to understand those contingent facts in terms of something that couldn't be otherwise. All right. So the reason why God or something, we haven't said that it's God yet at this point of the argument. We're saying it's a necessary being. The reason that there must be a necessary being, if you're going to think there's a sufficient explanation of all of these different things, is that, well, yeah, I just said it. There has to be a sufficient explanation of all of these things. And it has to be necessary in itself. And otherwise, you haven't really explained anything. The regress of explanation continues.
Yeah, exactly. There has to be a necessary being.
Anyway, I'm getting into the weeds here.
Yeah, that's okay.
But it gets at the idea. I was dragged kicking and screaming into faith. I didn't.
That's what happened to C.S. Lewis. He said the same thing in his book Surprised by Joy. You guys should read it. It's a pretty incredible testimony of his conversion from atheism to Christianity. He said that he was kicking and screaming to come into Christ. It doesn't mean that God forced them or raped them into believing in him or in Christ. Is because it's like he knew. It's like, I know this is true, but I don't want to believe it.
I didn't. Okay. I am not just philosophically, but constitutionally a skeptic and a question asker. And therefore, I don't change my mind on for trivial reasons. I don't like to make up my mind about things. And I certainly don't like to make up my mind very quickly. And it's distressing to change your worldview, because this required that if it's true that God exists, then there's a lot of things that I've previously believed that wouldn't be the case. Maybe the most important would be materialism. I actually was a I was a kind of physicalist. I was a property dualist. But at any rate, but I didn't believe necessarily in a spirit world of any sort. I thought that the ultimate explanations of the mind, the mental stuff was in physical terms ultimately somehow, and that. But I changed my mind about that because it's hard to. Well, let's put it this way. I decided to take seriously the possibility that I had been wrong about that.
Wow, when you come to that humbleness, that's powerful.
And when I started investigating that question, I found that the reasons that formerly seemed insufficient were now sufficient. What made a difference for me is that and this is what really made it a struggle, is that I was committed to methodological skepticism, right? So I'm really serious about not believing something unless I had really good reasons to believe it and I understood it very well, and generally speaking, thinking. And I said, okay, if I did decide to make up my mind, then how would I decide? And the more I read the Bible, the more I thought about the questions, the more I wrote about the questions, because I was writing a lot about philosophy of religion, essentially natural theology, it's called sometimes, in 2020, and I haven't stopped since then. The more I wrote about it, the more I became convinced that the case for the cumulative case for the existence of God really was stronger than otherwise. So if I was going to make up my mind, I'm going to go ahead and do it. But
Yeah, it seems like whenever a lot of people study the existence of God in the Bible and Christianity, it's not one evidence, because you can take one piece of thing and you can write it off, and a lot of atheists do that, and they succeed in writing it off. But if you take cumulative evidence, it's like, yeah, it begs like question. The Christianity is definitely true with the cumulative evidence.
Yeah, the thing that I can barely comprehend myself at this point is why I abandoned methodological skepticism to that extent. I guess a large part of it is I got old enough that I had no ego involved in that. Because I think there is a certain amount of ego involved in cherished beliefs of all sorts, and right, something like that.
Intelligent, strange. You also describe at a different time feeling warm about Christianity, finding it, quote, positively likable. Looking back now, how would you kind of assess these different factors at play? Was this a rational journey, a relational journey, an emotional journey, or all of the above in different fashions?
I'll tell you this, out of 100% honesty, at the time, I thought that it was more irrational than rational. I thought that the reasons that I had, like I said, kicking and screaming, were insufficient. And yet, looking back, the more I understand about the case, the stronger I think it was. I actually think that I was, in fact, proportioning my belief to the evidence as I understood it, and my understanding of the evidence and its how compelling it was changed in a period of about a year or half a year.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that in the end, well, let's put it this way. The reasons that I had for disbelief had all fallen away, right? And that sort of left me free to consider the proposition sort of neutrally on its own merits. And again, as I say, if I'm just going to make up my mind and come to the best explanation of all of the different arguments or the premises of all the arguments for the existence of God, indeed, the preponderance of the evidence seemed to be in favor of the existence of God.
Amen, brother. The preponderance of evidence is in favor of the existence of God. I mean, it really is true. It's like, it's incredible once you're just honest with yourself. Yeah.
Now, did it matter that there were, Christians that I knew and loved, admired, respected? Of course, actually, that mattered a lot. And if I didn't have any good examples of that sort, I'm sure I never would have taken the faith seriously, doctrine seriously. I think so. That's like one of the things that one of my reasons for disbelief dropped away. Because to be honest, and I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but when I was younger, maybe I was disrespectful when I was younger. When I was younger, I didn't have as much respect for believers. I thought that they were kind of dupes. I thought that they were, well, I mean, there were some really, really brilliant people. I never denied that, who were Christians. I mean, it's obvious. But, they had, it's possible for brilliant people to convince themselves of all kinds of ridiculous things.
Very true.
I mean, isn't that true? Of course, I still think that's true.
Yeah.
Right? So, but, as time went on, I began to appreciate the graces social graces, moral graces that Christians demonstrate in life. And I think they started making a lot more, they started carrying more weight. It started being a lot more important.
Yeah, the testimony of our lives is so important. It's like, it's one thing to study the truth in the Bible and believe that there's something out there, but once they see the evidence of a changed life, I mean, and again, Christians haven't been perfect, and it's sad, but I know that in my life I've strived to really, I haven't been perfect either, but I've tried to show the love of God to people. And it's like what happened to me. I could talk to them about doctrine all day and prove the Christianity, but unless they really see, like, does this even really work? Is this even true? I mean, it could just be fall on deaf ears.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful answer. I just want to emphasize to my audience the combination of good evidences and rational arguments and answering questions in the Bible, but also Christians being charitable, Christians being kind, Christians living out their faith with authenticity. Seeing that was a huge piece of your journey. We need both. So, love that you pointed that out. You're working on this 550-page project called God Exists, a philosophical case for the Christian God. Now, you didn't ask this, but I want to tell you, someone in the world of apologetics, write that. Keep working on it. I think this could be a huge gift for the church. Even just some of the insights you make in this paper alone. I have a master's in philosophy of religion. I'm an apologist. You made a couple insights. I was like, wow, I'm not sure I quite thought of it like that. So please keep plugging away. Let me know if I can help in any fashion with this, big or small. Would love to encourage you along in this journey, and want to thank you for coming on. And how can people? Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, that'd be great. How can people follow you? Is it your blog, or and they just kind of track with your continued thinking?
Yeah, I need to. There is a sign up form that I'm going to add to my blog soon. If you just leave a comment, then I will add you to the mailing list. But I'll try to get it up before this video goes live. There's a Telegram Bible study group, but that's Bible study. You know, if you want to read the Bible, we'll probably start again closer to the beginning of April. Link to that in.
Great invitation. Larry, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. This has been so wonderful to get to interact with you a little bit. Thanks for coming out and sharing your journey and your story. Phenomenal. Folks, before you click away, make sure you hit subscribe. We've got some.
Wow, guys, thank you for tuning in. This is one of the most incredible interviews from atheist, agnostic to Christian that I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of testimonies. I've talked to a lot of people that have studied these things, but this guy was one of the most intellectual guys ever. I mean, he's on the level of Daniel Dennett and Dan Barker and all these people who studied the exact same questions and said Christianity is evil, or the God of the Bible is evil. But this guy did the same things, knew all their questions, and wrote 500-page thesis about the Bible while he was still not a Christian. So it's like once you're really an honest seeker of the truth, no matter how hardened or well, let me rephrase it. No matter how skeptical you are, if your heart is not hardened, I believe you will find the grace to find the truth, because God is not like this hide and seek, Waldo, like where's Waldo? It's like, oh, if you find me, it's like I'm gonna keep hiding from you. But in a way, it's like God is looking for people who are honestly seeking Him. And if we look for God and honestly seek Him, we can find Him. We can find God, even if you're the most ardent skeptic, and even if you believe in methodological dualism, or dualism of reality, and where you don't believe in spiritual stuff. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really pray that you're blessed. You can find this interview as well if you want to share it on Sean McDowell's channel. If you want to share my video and the commentary that I did, share it to others. Leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Really appreciate all you guys. Some of you I talked to, but I hope you guys are really blessed tonight or today and this week. And really keep, if you believe in Jesus, keep seeking Him. Ask God to reveal Himself to you. If you don't, really keep studying the Bible with an intellectual openness. Even if there's things you don't understand that are hard, ask for advice, wisdom. Go online, research it like Larry Sanger did. Because this guy, Wikipedia founder, I mean, you would never, these guys are ultra atheists, I mean, who founded Wikipedia. But this guy is one of those founders, and he studied it for decades and realized, wow, if I just really studied the truth, I would come to realize, the Bible is not hocus pocus. So hope you guys really study the Bible and really ask God for wisdom. He'll reveal Himself to you. So thanks for stopping by, and Again, if you guys want to subscribe. If you want to support this channel and my ministry, there's descriptions in the description link, in the description page of the video. You'll see a way to support me, through the YouTube, becoming a member, or through a donation to the ministry website.